Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this IOP Speaker Series event, A Woman's Place is in the House, a conversation with Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. My name is Tanaka Namarundwe. I am a second-year majoring in political science and economics at the university, and I currently serve as one of the House Manager interns at the IOP. It is my honor today to introduce our special guest, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Representative Nancy Pelosi served on the Democratic National Committee and as chair of the California Democratic Party from 1981 to 1983. In 1984, Pelosi served as host committee for the Democratic Convention in San Francisco. Fast forward to 1987, she was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In 2002, Pelosi became the minority whip of the Democratic Party, and later that year, Pelosi became the House Minority Leader, making history as the first woman to lead a party in Congress. In March 2007, Representative Pelosi was elected as the first ever woman Speaker of the House. Throughout her career, Pelosi has championed the American people through her sincere dedication to public service and our democracy. In March 2010, Representative Pelosi worked diligently on improving access to affordable health care through her contributions to establishing the Affordable Care Act. Just months later, Pelosi helped support rights for the LGBTQ+ community through her commitment to repealing the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act. In 2013, Pelosi was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls, the home of the historic Seneca Falls Convention, and the birthplace of the women's rights movement. Through her distinguished leadership over the years, Pelosi has proved an exceptional role model for women everywhere through helping pave the way for women in politics. And today's moderator is Jennifer Steinhauer, a director at the IOP. Before joining the IOP, Jennifer worked for the New York Times covering the news of U.S. politics and Congress. In 2020, Jennifer revealed the lived experiences of our female legislators with her book, The Firsts, The Inside Story of the Women Shaping Congress. Before we begin today's discussion, please remember to silence your cell phones. After today's discussion, we will turn to audience questions, so please raise your hand and a staffer will bring a microphone to you. Students will be given priority. Today, at the start of Women's History Month, I can think of no better role model to share her experiences with us today than Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Thank you so much again for joining us today, and please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Jennifer Steinhauer and Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi.
Welcome to Chicago.
Thank you.
So we are here to kick off Women's History Month, and it feels appropriate if we start talking a lot about your own history in politics, and specifically in the House. I want to hear your reflections, if I could, on the time that you first entered into the House and to this point, when you first got there. There are many stories. It wasn't always the greatest and most welcoming place for women, historically and even at the time that you arrived. And I'm curious, with reflection, what you remember about those early days and how things have or have not changed presently in the House.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and I thank the IOP for the invitation to be with all of you today. David Axelrod, I've been with him at the IOP before, and he sends his regards and regrets that he can't be with us. But aren't we lucky that Jennifer is? This is a distinguished journalist in our country, and it's... So I want you to know that when she asks her questions, that this is no softball here. And we look forward to hearing from all of you. It's great to be in Chicago. I was just earlier today with the Speaker of the House of Representatives here, Speaker Welch, where he was honoring women in power in the legislature and beyond as we open up Women's History Month. But I want Women's History Month to be Women's Progress Month. We make history, we want to make progress, and all of you are part of the future that progress will benefit and that you will shape. So when I went to Congress, it was, there were 23 women out of, take this room, This room about 500 people. Well, there are 435 members of Congress, of the House. So just short of this, 23 women, like these two rows, 12 Democrats, 11 Republicans. The minute I saw that, I thought, this has to change. I mean, really? This is no reflection of our country. And we worked very hard. Now we have 90 women, and we want more. But then the Republicans got about 30, so about 120. So we've come a way, but we have a long way to go. Numbers are important because it's all about the votes, and the votes are the power there. We made a decision to reach out to women, to encourage them to run, as I am doing today, to all of you women here, all of you young people here, because the country really needs that invigoration. I think if we would lower the role of money in politics, increase the civility there, we would have better participation in government. So it's very different now. In the beginning, it was irrelevant to them. There were so few of us. And many of us were new, so it was, when you've been here a couple of terms, we might remember your name, kind of thing. And then when our numbers started to grow, and it wasn't so interesting anymore, it was sort of, what are they doing now? Why are they all dressed in purple today? Why are they all dressed in green today? What are they all doing in the well together? What is it? Because we started to get a critical mass. But it was, we really did have to make a decision, because on the natural, it just wasn't happening. I myself had no interest in running for Congress. I had no interest in running for office. I was chair of the party a long time, of the Northern California Party. Before I was the chair, and I loved organizing, loved putting other people forward. So I was constantly into the numbers in organizing and winning elections. So when I was asked to run for Congress, I didn't, some of you, Thomas and Sheila, you've heard me say this even today, I had absolutely no interest. I was basically a very shy person. I wasn't going to put myself out there in the front line, but I loved putting other people out there. And so I went home and said to my daughter Alexandra, I had 5 children in 6 years. I keep saying that because I want the bishops to keep hearing me say that when I have my, shall we say, disagreements on a woman's right to choose. But our youngest daughter, she was 16, she was going into her senior year in high school. So I said to her, Alexandra, Mommy has been been asked to run for Congress. I've been urged to do so. I said I would think about it, but I love my life, and it would be better if it were 1 year from now when you were on your way to college rather than high school, senior year. I'd be just gone about 3 or 4 nights a week, 3 nights a week, sometimes Monday through Wednesday night, Thursday, Tuesday through Friday. Yeah, tell me that, I'd be gone 3 nights a week. So, but I won't do it if you don't think I should. Any answer is okay with me. Any answer is okay with me. To which she said, and I had never heard this expression before, this was a long time ago, Jennifer, she said, Mother, get a life.
Children are so heartwarming, aren't they, really, honestly?
What teenage daughter wouldn't want her mother gone 3 nights a week?
That's fair.
So I got a life, another life. I had a life. And in any event, I went, and I quite frankly enjoyed it. And they said I would, because you're working on substance, you're working on issues, or you're working on policy. Now, I love politics, too, and I like winning elections. And if I didn't, I would never have gotten to be speaker, because that's the path. You have to have the majority. So I did love it because I care about children. And I always tell women or young people, if you are interested in this, know your why. Know why you're interested. Is it about democracy? Is it about climate? Is it about education? Is it about fairness? Is it about LGBTQ? What is it that motivates you to be interested? Know your why and know your what. Know about the issue so that you can talk about it and people respect your judgment. You don't have to know everything. Nobody does. And you always want to be current anyway. So why, what, how? Just know how to get it done. You got to be able to count. The votes are very, very important. And mostly you have to show people what is in your heart. Your sincerity, your authenticity, what you really care about, and you're there for them. So it was something I really, really enjoyed, and again, especially as the number of women grew. And if the number of women had not grown, we would have never had a woman speaker.
And we're still, it's, what is it, barely 25% of the entire Congress are women right now. But at the time, too, when you were there, wasn't there, at that time, women formed together their own sort of informal caucus that really at some point did transcend partisanship in many ways. Isn't that fair to say that that changed quite a bit in more recent years, where partisanship sort of transcends those gender cooperation, as it were?
Well, first let me just say that yes, we had come together in a bipartisan way. One of the unifying things continues to be are issues like violence against women or trafficking today is an issue that brings women together. But in those days, and not that any issue should be the litmus test, but a very important issue to many of us was a woman's right to choose. And then we could have some bipartisanship among the women on that subject. Not anymore. Not anymore. It's the first time in our history where freedom has gone backward instead of more forward, whether it's the Supreme Court, the Republican Party, or in Congress, not in the country, but in Congress. So, yeah, we had more commonality of interest. We worked together on Title IX, which was important. That was even before I got there, but to stave off the assaults on it that people wanted to undo it. But we still have a bipartisan women's group, and as I said, mostly issues that would relate to violence against women. Except I want to just tell you this story because it's important that you know. When we were reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, not the most recent time, but the time before when President Obama was president, 600 days had gone by and we had not reauthorized it. Almost a whole term. But they would not, the other side would not do it. It had passed the Senate in a bipartisan way. But in the House, they would, the Speaker then, my friend, I respect him, but he would not take up the Violence Against Women Act in the House. Then they said, okay, well, I said, write your own, and then we'll go have, Queen of the Hill or King of the Hill, whichever version we wanted to have. I mean, one of them you have to have the most votes. The other one, it's just a little, you don't want to know, you don't need to know about that. But in any event, they said, we'll have our own bill. And they had a bill. Now, it's the Republicans in the House. Our bill is, we are against violence against women, unless you're an immigrant woman, a Native American woman, or an LGBTQ woman. Probably the three most vulnerable categories where violence against women is an issue. That's her bill. Not one against violence of women, not so fast, immigrants, Native Americans, or LGBTQ. I said, that's just so horrible, I can't even grasp it. But that was their bill. So finally I talked them into bringing both bills to the floor, our bill and their bill. And they voted for that as if they were voting against violence against women. But we won King or Queen of the Hill with the bill that had passed the Senate. It was bipartisan. It wasn't even as good as what we would do later when we could really go without worrying about what would pass the Senate.
So we tracked some of that history. Let's get more into recent history, especially as it pertains to decisions you made with leadership. We know now how you decided to run for Congress. We know your path to leadership. I remember distinctly in 2012 being in the room when a young male reporter asked you if you should not stay on as leader anymore. There were a lot of women behind you at that time. And you called it offensive. And years later, I think people came to have a different view of that, seeing and viewing you as the important person to be there for Democrats in the Trump years. But eventually, at some point, you decided that it was time to step down in your leadership role. Can you walk us through your private process of how you got there, how you made that decision?
Well, that's only important as it might relate to any experiences that you may have, even at your young age, and yours, going from a nationally recognized, respected journalist into this wonderful other manifestation of leadership here. My only regret, two regrets, not regrets exactly, but two things that I would like to have done differently. First of all, as Speaker of the House, says she immodestly, I had the best staff ever assembled in the history of the Congress. Policy, healthcare, tax, whatever the subject was, they knew it. Also connected to the community in terms of listening and the rest. Strategic in terms of how we were going to win the votes. Respectful of the committees, because that's where the work is generated in the committees, and hopefully as bipartisan as possible, but if not, to make sure we had the vote. So my leaving meant these people were gone. You know, they've headed up other offices, many of them absorbed by the new leadership. It's all good, but it's not that same thing. Just telling you one little thing. The other thing is more significant. I fully had hoped to walk out the door, leaving them in the majority. And we came very close in the election, despite what people said it was going to be 40 votes, 35 votes, all that, it was 5. And I thought that we could have won that. We had some disappointment in New York on that score. But I did want to leave them in the majority because the difference between the majority and the minority is so vast. When you see, in this day and age, when you see how the transition went as one indication for them as to how it is. It's really hard. We don't have as much common ground as we did then. I mean, I've worked with Republicans for decades, and some of them are my best friends. In Congress, we've worked on many issues globally, security. Many of us went together to Munich for the Munich conference just a week and a half ago. This bracelet was given to me by a soldier from the front line. It's bullets, and so we had bipartisan, big delegation in that regard. But by and large, on the day-to-day kitchen table issues that affect the lives of the American people, there's very little agreement.
So just to be clear, if you had maintained the majority, you still would have stepped down as Speaker at that point?
Yes.
And is that for generational reasons, for reasons of bringing new leadership?
I just thought it was, no. I mean, I'm Italian American, which means I have an enormous amount of energy. I've raised 5 kids in 6 years, which means I know how to manage things. I'm a cook, a chauffeur, a quartermaster corps, a homework, oh my God. You really have to, a diplomat, a referee, the whole thing. So I know how to get things done. I'm not worried about time and the rest of that. Age is a relative thing. But I will also say this. Many times women go to Congress after they've started their families and the rest. So they have a later start. So my running in my 40s was the equivalent of men running in their 30s, really, because it wasn't the equivalent. But by the time I got to be senior on a committee, I would be in my 50s, they'd be in their 40s. So making judgments about when you should leave by a reporter, I haven't seen them since, have you?
On Twitter.
He's
He's there. He's
on
around.
Twitter. Okay,
He's
good
there.
for him. But
nice
with all due respect,
He's a nice guy.
he found, I mean, I'm very friendly with his mother forever, but
He's a
the
sweet
thing is this. Don't come around and ask me about my age because I'm a woman when I'm winning elections and Mitch McConnell is losing elections, and you never asked him about his age, which is comparable to mine. So I just thought it was sexist in addition to ageist, and really not very smart that day because we were on the stage with a large number of women members, you may recall, and they reacted more than I would have reacted, but then, rose to the occasion. But anyway, to all of you, it is, we should get to a place of less partisanship. What is our country about? This fabulous place, this genius of these founders to establish a country founded on an idea of equality, even though our founding documents did not fully left much to be desired, but they did make them amendable. So in our country, we've always been expanding freedom in the Constitution, the abolition of slavery, the right to vote for black men anyway, and then later women to be able to vote, marriage equality more recently, and then the Dobbs decision. The first time we went backward, we went in the reverse direction. And that is not even a reflection of what most people in America think. Not everybody's the same place on a woman's right to choose, but the Dobbs decision. So I say that because there are areas of common ground that we have a responsibility to find in a bipartisan way. There are areas of everything should be an area of transparency so that the public can see what is happening and weigh in on that. And that doesn't mean that they vote Democratic because of what we think. It means they try to hold everybody to what they want, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. And then accountability, and that's really what the elections are about.
But in fairness to him at the time, what he said was that there were people in the House who were seeking leadership roles. And some people have made a parallel criticism on the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, as you know, and feel like President Biden should move aside and let a new generation of leadership run the next go-around for the White House. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think I want to be talking about what happened 15 years ago or what, but I will say this. The next two people behind me in leadership were either older than I was or my same age. So it was like, what?
What do you think about president, though? What do you think about that criticism?
Have you talked to the president? Okay. I mean, I'm not big on worrying about what some press person asked me 15 years ago now and what that means for Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been a great and successful president of the United States. He beat Trump. He beat Trump. I mean, I love you dearly, but we'll have an honest conversation here, right? Okay, he beat Trump. I know how I am at my age, and I'm 2 years older than he is. And I'm Italian, and I eat a lot of chocolate, so it might be different. I mean, I have a lot of energy. I've raised 5 kids in 6 years. But this is a man, remember things I said before about know your why and how and what and all? He knows his purpose. He has a vision for America. He is so values-based. He knows the substance. Sometimes when we'd be talking about some of the legislation, I said, well, we really have to pass it because it has this in it or this in it. He'll say, you don't have to tell me what's in it. I wrote it. I wrote it 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I campaigned on it now. He knows, and therefore his judgment is good on those things. He's been a legislator for decades, not only before you were born, but before your parents were born, in many cases. So he knows how to get things done. He's a legislator, and he's a strategic thinker. And as I've said to you about In the Heart, this is a person who is the most empathetic, authentic, sincere leader. He is so remarkable in that regard. So people trust him heart to heart, as well as appreciate him head to head on some of these other things. So I think if he wants to run, if he decides that he wants to run, it would be a great thing for our country. That's a decision that he has to make. But it isn't a decision about people saying, "Oh, you're a little old for your age." Well, maybe he is or maybe he isn't. I don't know. That's a personal decision that he has to make. But I certainly hope. Look at the agenda that we got through under his leadership. The Recovery Act, the rescue package. The rescue package, money to states and localities, counties and cities, money in people's pockets, shots in their arms, children back in school safely, people back to work without one Republican vote. Then we did the infrastructure bill, a very important bill for our country to build the infrastructure of America in a way that had equity. 40% of it must go to communities of color in a way that unites communities, not divides them. And with just so much fairness in it. 13 Republican votes. Now that was good. I mean, 13, but nonetheless bipartisan. Then we go to the CHIPS Act, CHIPS and science. This is a president who has declared our independence from other countries, self-reliant on our supply chain. We're not going to be held up in the future. We're going to make it in America. And not only that, God bless you, not only that, the science part of it is going to train in science. Well, in California and San Francisco, we call it STEAM, science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics, we call it that. But nonetheless, a major investment in that and reaching into communities so that we have diversity of ideas and everything coming into how we do science. The CHIPS part was important for now. The science part was important for the future. PACT Act, helping millions of our veterans who might have been exposed to burn pits and the rest of that. And then the IRA. I mean, I'm just giving you some examples. The IRA, $368 billion to save the planet. No country, not ours, ever did anything so big in a way that recognizes the private sector role, the public-private partnerships and the rest to save the planet and to advance the technology in a way that brings people of color, women into all of this, and without one Republican vote. Did I tell you that? Now, without one, because we just have total disagreement on the planet, and that's another major division. So in any case, he has done a remarkable job. Of course, I give credit to my House members for our part of it because it was their courage that made all of this happen. We all agree on the priorities and the commitment and the conviction that we have about it, but if you don't have the courage, you ain't got the votes. And some of this they have to sell back home as being misrepresented by the other side. Even on the votes where we would get 13 or 20 Republican votes. So yes, I think he should run. Yes, I think he would win. It's up to him to decide whether he will. I don't think it has to do so much with age unless he thinks it does.
So with all that legislative process that we've just laid out, how do you manage your role now? Do you offer advice? I have this picture of members like coming secretly to your office and asking to kind of mediate things. I mean, what's it feel like now? What is your kind of day-to-day like?
I'm so totally liberated. I mean, for 20 years, my friends, for 20 years, I was either the leader or the speaker. And it was a different job when you're got the gavel. It's a different job. And so, but you were always responsible for so much, especially a speaker. Speaker has awesome power and awesome responsibility. Well, it used to have power. It's become the ever-shrinking speakership after the giveaways and the...
We'll get to that.
The other day. but the hard part, being speaker, you have a responsibility to get legislation passed, all the rest of that. The hardest part for me, do you want to know what the hardest part for me was? No?
Yeah, we do.
I didn't hear anything. Was when we had a Democratic president, Barack Obama, fabulous. Thank you, Illinois, for sending us Barack Obama. One of the sources of great pride that I take immodestly is the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Millions more people having access, 150 million more families having better benefits at a lower cost. All of that, okay, you know it. So, but when we lost, the Republicans would put up things like, well, we're going to put this in the bill, and it sounds great. It's water, right? It's water. And my members would say, I'm going to vote for that. I say, you can't vote for that. That undermines the Affordable Care Act. Well, it sounds good in my district. And I said, well, but it's wrong. You can't do that to the president. You cannot override. We have to sustain his veto when he vetoes what they're doing to take apart the Affordable Care Act. Well, you don't know my district. I said, then you don't know the Affordable Care Act. So, nicely, you know, but... And that was hard because I love these people, and they made the vote when they had to make the vote. But when you get a gotcha, see, they have gotchas, they'll put things in there that look really good back home, but are terrible in terms of public policy and an embarrassment to the president. And when you have to talk to your own people rather than listening and following their lead, but just telling them you're dead wrong, that was really the hard part. Being in the minority with a Democratic president to sustain the veto.
Let's talk about the relationship between minority leader and speaker. Maybe people might not have that much visibility into that. I mean, it always seemed to me like you had a really good relationship with John Boehner, even though you had to best him in some fights. But
and Ryan.
And you seemed to work well with Paul Ryan. So I think Kevin McCarthy, current speaker, I think you referred to him in political science lexicon as a moron.
I want to clarify that. I didn't say he was a moron. I don't talk that way. I said what he said was moronic.
Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah, no, I did say that, but he said something so ridiculous. I said, that's moronic, but the press heard the moron part, but I would never called anybody a moron. But what he said, yeah.
Did feel a little off-brand. So but fair to say it's been a different dynamic with you and Kevin McCarthy than you have with prior Republican
Well, I always
leaders.
have a cordial personal relationship. You know, I would call him and tell, I said, Kevin, get this done, you know, before the day came, you know, like when it was like December or something. Just get it done. You need to get it done. You need to get it done for the institution, for our state of California, for the institution of the House of Representatives. We can't have this mess, which we did get. So I do have that. I can talk to him. But we have zero in common on policy because they just play to that. Well, you saw it on TV. Well, maybe you weren't up that late. But they go way to that radical right wing. I mean, conservative is a very legitimate place to be on the spectrum. Radical right wing can be destructive, and they were. But that's what rules his thing.
So why were you so concerned that he gave Tucker Carlson thousands of hours of raw footage from January 6th? What are your fears there?
That was totally unthinkable. That was not moronic. It was totally dangerous. You don't do that. In other words, and then, but he does it and said, well, this is what Nancy did. No, I never did. I never did do that. There is nothing that ever left without it being vetted by the or originated and vetted by the security officials of the Capitol, the police, the sergeant at arms, and all the rest of that, because you are endangering not only the members, the press, the staff, the interns, the custodians, the maintenance people. You're endangering everybody by doing that. So you don't do that. But to give it to, and so it would have been wrong even to give it to everybody without the vetting. But to give it to somebody who was an election denier, a Putin wing person in the Republican Party, a Putin wing person in the Republican Party, I want to make sure you heard that, and that wasn't incidental or accidental. And to give him that information was so far beyond the pale. Now, in all fairness, everybody should see it if he sees it, right? All the press should see it, but it should never have gone outside without the vetting that needed to happen.
So speaking of January 6th, and we've been talking about extremism that was tied to conspiracy theories and so forth, do you feel that the horrific attack on your husband there's a through line with January 6th and the conspiracy theories that popped almost immediately after that from the far right? Did you anticipate that, or was that, even in this environment, was that shocking to you?
Well, my husband getting hit over the head with a hammer in our home was shocking to me. I guess you call it the conspiracy theory, that they're making up all kinds of stories and the rest, is so sad for our country. I mean, I didn't like it because of my grandchildren, my children, hearing, instead of people being sympathetic, that their grandfather was hit over the head by somebody who broke into our home. Then they say didn't break in, but you know, all the evidence is there of a person coming through the window and all the rest of it, but ignoring the facts of it is really sad. Yes, it is a continuation of that same, I would say breed of cat, but I love our cat so much. It's such an element that's very dangerous in our society. It's not anything like maybe in the 30s or something when they had all that negativity, America First and all that stuff, but certainly not in the years that I served in the Congress until Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich changed things, and that began a path of politics of personal destruction. So I wouldn't say nothing surprises me anymore, because we had a president of the United States who incited an insurrection on the Capitol of the United States on the day the Constitution told us that we were supposed to certify the election of the President of the United States. So an assault on the Capitol, assault on the Constitution, assault on our democracy. What could be surprising after that? And then the danger that it put everybody in, and then the further exacerbation of that danger with Kevin doing that. That was not surprising, but disappointing nonetheless.
So with that lens of history that you just alluded to, and all the time that you've spent on the Hill, particularly in leadership, and you're sitting, far from Washington here in Illinois, with students who, many of them want to go into public service, they want to see hope. Whether it's bipartisan unity in Washington in some regard, or it's some way to bridge what everyone has acknowledged as this intense polarization in our country, where do you see the slivers of hope?
Well, I thank you for that, because it takes us back to this room out of the dreadfulness of some of what has been happening. But you always have to be hopeful. And elections are what our founders believed in, to have democracy, freedom. And in that way, people can weigh in on what they believe, what they think. But there has to be a return to fact and truth in what is conveyed during an election. Why would you when people say, people don't respect Congress, Congress has always been a source of some mockery over time. But why would you respect an institution where, when the people are running, you hear this kind of conspiracy theory stuff that they're saying. And I'll just say this to the women. I dedicated a lot of my priority in Congress was to elect more women to Congress. But I would talk to women and they'd say, I can never let my family be subjected to what you're subjected to. I just can't. I can't have my kids coming home from school crying because they saw a bad ad on TV that the other side put on that had nothing to do with anything factual, but attacked my integrity, attacked the integrity of my family or my patriotism and the rest. And so that's a bad thing. So I think that we have to do what we can to extract it from our political arena, because as I said, if you reduce the role of money and increase the level of civility, you will have more young people, more minorities, more women, more diversity in our system, and that's a very wholesome thing. Nothing could be more wholesome than that. So, we were devastated about his health first and foremost, so we were so focused on that and still are. But the idea that they, including leaders in Congress and the rest, saying terrible things was disappointing. But you know what? We don't agonize, we organize. You just can't get bogged down with some question you might get at a press conference or what the extreme radical right wing of the manifestation of a person who was president incited an insurrection on our country. You have to just think in a positive way about what you believe, what you care about, how you identify with other people who care about some of the same things. And it's all about the future. That's why I'm so excited to be here with all of you, because you must have some interest in public policy for the future, for the children, and well, some of you don't consider yourself children, but you're the next generation of that. And your question is so perfect, because it's not about what was, it's about what we go to next. And what better time than Women's History Month, when we can make sure women know that, know their power, know how needed they are in the political process, and take inventory of who they are. Now, each one of you, just think of yourself. You are the only version of a person in the history of the whole world. When I was not doing politics, I was on the board of a Leakey Foundation. I'm big interested in the history of mankind. So here you are, the only version of you, of all of the things, environment, upbringing, genetics, all the rest, your family, all of that is you. So what do I think about this? It's authentically, originally you. So be you, whenever it is that you decide to go out there and do. People have their mentors and they have this and that, and that's all a nice thing. But it's you, the only one in the history of the world. Just know your power. Aren't you proud of yourselves? Don't you just think you're so wonderful? And maybe there's some room for doing more things. That's what gives me hope, the young people, because you have an impatience that is very valuable. You have a disdain for the status quo, which is critically important, but you have you.
We're going to give them a chance to ask you some questions in a few minutes, so start thinking of all your questions and looking for our friends with the microphones. I just want to do a couple quick policy, if I can squeeze it in. You were a hawk on China before that was cool, basically. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that and about your decision on Taiwan, which got a lot of attention at the time.
Yeah. For even before Tiananmen Square, I have been critical of China in terms of human rights, trade policy, and proliferations of technology of weapons of mass destruction. This goes way back. I met with His Holiness the Dalai Lama in like 88, 89 was Tiananmen Square, and since then, well, we saw the brutality of it all. But as we put the spotlight on China at that time, we saw that they were shipping technology of weapons of mass destruction and delivery systems to rogue countries. So we were saying we cannot this go unnoticed, unchallenged, and the rest. They had unfair trade practices, a lack of market access into the Chinese market for America, and we had. The brutality continues. In fact, under Xi, in recent days, it's gotten worse than it had been before. Not originally, but it had ebbed, and now it is flowing. Whether it's the Uyghurs, whether it's the Tibetans, whether it's Hong Kong, whether it's people throughout China, it's terrible. So I take second place to no one in Congress in my criticism of China and their policies, and U.S. policies under Democratic and Republican presidents, terrible, because driven by corporate America, who just wanted access to the market, didn't care about anything else, and said, oh, they're going to become democratic if we let them buy our insurance or use our banks or something like that. So this runs deep. We could spend all day on this. But I do think that you have to handle the relationship with care. It's a very big country, a very big economy, and so you have to be smart about how you deal with it. When what's-his-name became president, I said there's a way to deal with China. So he used China. They took our jobs, they took our this, they took our that, and he used it as a cudgel. China as a cudgel, without any thought about how do we make this right. And I said to him, what we have to do is to join with the EU, the United States and the EU, the biggest market that anybody could ever imagine, and use the leverage of the marketplace to stop the proliferation, the trade violations, and the human rights to the extent that we can impact that. But what he did was he put tariffs on the EU right away. I don't know if you followed any of that, but it was not in furtherance of our coming together to deal with China. But now we have to, because with all G5, G6 already, and probably G10 before you know it, we cannot allow our data, our privacy, and all the rest be so overtaken by China. So we have to deal with that. But we also have to deal with China on the climate issues. We are the biggest emitters. They're like the second biggest emitters. And we have to have just some hope that we can find a path to. So I'm hopeful that the new committee that is formed will be strategic and not strictly punitive just for the sake of public relations, but strategic in terms of how we can come together in a way that does help us save the planet, stop the proliferation, have a freer trade. I mean, I could go longer into it, but you may have other questions.
I do. I only have 15 seconds, so this will be a yes or no question, and then you can line up, you can raise your hand and let our friends in the mic.
Taiwan, just to say to the president, we're not isolating Taiwan. We're not changing our policy. We have a one-China policy. But we're not isolating Taiwan. Okay?
This is yes or no. This is a niche question for our friends from Washington. President Biden has said he will not veto a Republican measure blocking the District of Columbia from changing its own criminal codes. People in D.C. really hate when Congress does that. Do you agree with President Biden, yes or no?
The mayor of D.C. The mayor of D.C. shared, yes or no? Well, let me just say it more than that. If he was going to do it, I wish he would have told us first, because this was a hard vote for the House members, and it's a hard vote for the Senate members. And the mayor of District of Columbia even differed from the legislators who passed it, so it wasn't that clear. And so it was a hard vote for some of our members. I'm a big supporter of statehood for the District of Columbia. I voted with the District of Columbia. I understand why some people voted against. But if the president's going to do it, hey, could you give us a heads up too in the House?
Okay, note to Washington. So who's ready to go with the first question?
Student? Yes, students.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Cameron Landon. I am a second year in the college and president of U Chicago Democrats.
Okay.
Currently, each member of the House represents about 700,000 people, up from 450,000 50 years ago and 250,000 100 years ago. And 100 years ago was when the House first reached 435 members. So do you believe that this number has grown too large, and would you consider supporting expanding the size of the House of Representatives?
It's about 800. It's about 780 now. My district is about that. Our districts are the same, but it's more than 700,000. It's over 750. Yeah, since 29 or something was the last time they increased it, and they said this is the end. At the beginning of our country, they had it was like 59 members or something, and then they said every 10 years it would increase. They could increase 10% more, not 10% more, 10 more or something, until they reached the 435, and then they said that's it. That should be a discussion, but I don't think it should take the place of protecting our democracy, period. And right now, with what is happening there, with the other side preventing us from passing the For the People Act to stop the suppression of the vote, the influence of big dark money, special interest money that suffocates the airwaves for freedom of ideas to go forward. I think that's a more important priority. But I think size of the House of Representatives and the Supreme Court, which hasn't been changed since Lincoln's era, is something that should be reviewed. But I appreciate your question, but we have an emergency right now for our democracy. Not to be a fearmonger, but we have an emergency right now for our democracy. And I don't want the discussion to go down a path that is not recognizing how serious it is as to what they're trying to do in D.C. now.
This side of the stage.
Who?
Oh, okay. Hello, my name is Navya Kupasetti, and I'm a first-year MPP here at Harris School of Public Policy. And my first question is, when you were a leader in the House, and you have passed so many bills throughout your time, which bill that you thought could have been revised more, where that society, maybe 70% or 80% of society can agree on?
Well, the most important bill for me that we passed and it was under President Obama, was the Affordable Care Act. It did not enjoy that level of support then, but it is getting closer to that now. Not that people will vote for it in Congress, but the American people support it. And that was because we took it to the public. When the Republicans said that they were going to repeal and replace, we never saw their replace. It was just they want to repeal. The way we saved the bill, and this is the message I want to give you, I'm using your question for the way we saved it was by mobilization. Inside maneuvering, you can just do so much. There's a finite number of votes, that's it. But the outside mobilization, the transparency that people will know what's going on. So when they did that, when they were taking up their vote, they're going to know that. We had 10,000 events around the country where people told their story. My baby was born with a heart condition, had 3 operations by the time 18 months, $1 million in hospital bills. We would never have been able to pay it without the Affordable Care Act. And then the list just goes, 10,000 events, hundreds of thousands of stories. So the outside mobilization is what you all have to know is where the power is. Inside maneuvering, essential. outside mobilization makes it happen. Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. Now, to your question, over 70% of the American people, including gun owners, support background checks. But we can't get that passed in the Congress. Same thing with the minimum wage, but we can't get it passed in the Congress. And so there are many, many issues that do enjoy popular and bipartisan support outside the Congress, not so much inside. When I was minority leader, we did the voting rights bill. We were in the minority, but we had, the Black Caucus what led the way on that. We wrote the bill in my office as minority leader. John Lewis leading the way. Beautiful John Lewis. It got about 400 votes in the House. No objection whatsoever in the Senate, unanimous. We walked down the steps together. Frist was the Republican leader then, and I walked down the steps together. President Bush signed the bill. That was then. We can't even get them to bring it to the floor now. But we want it to because the court said that they did what they did, and God knows what they might do next. Please, God. But in any event, that there are things that do have popular support, but it's not reflected. And one of the reasons is the role of big, dark money in politics. That's why we put so much emphasis on passing that bill, because people know that it is crossing a threshold if you want to protect the environment. All those kinds of things that are impacted by big, dark money, the cost of prescription drugs, guns. It's not NRA, it's the gun industry. So there are many things that have that popular support that just have not been translated through elections into members of Congress. But to give you one example, I would give you the Voting Rights Act of 2007.
Let's go over here.
Hi, Ms. Pelosi. I'm the person who just sneezed in the middle. Thank you for saying bless
God
you.
bless you, darling.
Thank you. My name is Joyce, and I'm an international student at the college. So I have two questions. One of them is about, as a woman, I just think it's so impressive that you had so many kids and yet you're so successful with your career. So I just want to know how you handle that and how you manage all your responsibilities, both as a mother and everything that you do in politics. And then my second question is, as an international student, I'm curious to hear what you appreciate most about the United States.
Oh, well, why don't I start with that? This is the greatest country in the world. It was, as the president. As the president says, and he said it today at a Medal of Honor ceremony, it's a country that was founded on an idea. Most countries are founded by not geography, but also ethnicity and the rest. Now they have more diversity in their countries, but that's how we started. Again, our founding documents proclaiming this country, but not having it perfect. Not that we did it right from the start, but we understand that it always has to be improved. So it's great. And what I said to my colleagues last night when I was speaking to them in Baltimore, I said, remember all these things when we have these challenges, January 6th and all the other things that they won't pass certain bills, that you're in Baltimore, and that's where the War of 1812, one of the battles was the Battle of Fort McHenry, and that's where Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem. And my favorite line in there is, and our flag is still there. With all of this January 6th and all this other stuff, our flag is still there. And it is such a remarkable symbol of freedom. Democracy, yes, but people think of that as a form of government. I may not want that form of government, but I do want freedom, in other countries as they look to us. And right now, America has stood so tall in protecting freedom and democracy in its support of the freedom fighters in Ukraine. It is so remarkable. These people in Ukraine are fighting for their own freedom, for their own democracy. But in doing so, they're fighting for ours. And we have to remember that as we send humanitarian, economic, military assistance, as we insist on sanctions on Russia, that it's protecting not only the Ukrainians, but NATO and the rest. And let me just say this one thing, because I was your age when I heard this. When John F. Kennedy was inaugurated, I was in school, I was in college, and I went to that, and everybody in the world, you all know what he said in that speech. To the citizens of America, ask not what your country, you could say it, your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. But the very next sentence in the speech is what just caught me, because I was learning this stuff in school. The very next sentence in the speech was, to the citizens of the world, ask not what America can do for you, but what we can do working together for the freedom of mankind. And that is exactly what Joe Biden has done in this past year, and even before that, leading into the threat of Russia's invasion of a sovereign country. I said to him, this is your Kennedy-esque moment, because you did what he said, what we can do working together, not condescending or dictating to or anything else, listening, working together in terms of priorities, in terms of pace, of when to do things. Putin thought that he was going to break up NATO, and instead he strengthened it. He thought he was going to Finlandize NATO. No, he thought he was going to, meaning that it was going to break up, and instead he Finlandized NATO by Finland joining, and they will join soon. In fact, I have the president of Finland in San Francisco at the beginning of next week, so we're very excited. We still have a problem with Turkey, want Sweden, but in any event, it's about respect. I always use that word. It's about respect for the other countries, the other people, and what they're thinking, but also understanding our power, our weight in what we technologically, intellectually, philosophically, financially can bring to the table. So again, my answer to your question about America is the flag is still there.
Can we go over here?
Hi, I'm Melia. I'm a fourth year in the college. I use she, they pronouns, and I am one of the outreach directors for the IOP's Women and Gender Minorities in Public Service. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted to ask a question. So given that Women's History Month is not complete without recognizing the non-binary people who live and have lived in like the label's shadow, the shadow of being a woman, how can we go about uplifting non-women gender minorities in politics?
Well, again, I started the morning with this session at 8 a.m. What is the threats to LGBTQ, especially transgender community? I brought to the meeting my nephew, who lives in Baltimore, because that's where I'm from, and his daughter, trans daughter, fabulous. We're so thrilled. She's so happy. And I wanted her to hear what the discussion was. The threats around in legislatures, there were like 300 bills floating out there against health care, not allowing health care, even though the American Medical Association has approved this, and all the health care, education, and sports. And sports seems to be the one that in terms of whether it's trans or binary or whatever. And it's like, well, wait a minute, kids just want to go play sports. Let's not make it about winning and losing. Let's just make it about kids playing sport. But they presented different challenges, different tactics, what the NCAA, what the Olympics, others are doing. But to take the fear, the negativity out of this discussion, what are we talking about here? We're talking about people. We're talking about people, and we're talking about respect. So sometimes people say to me, well, it's easy for you. You represent San Francisco. People are so tolerant there. I said, don't use the word tolerant with me. That's condescending. That's not what we are. We're not tolerant. We respect. We take pride. And these are people of faith who are criticizing other people for loving their children and wanting them to have the health, education, and recreation that they should have. But I do think, and I was with George Bush on Saturday where we celebrate the 20th anniversary of PEPFAR. And we talked about PEPFAR and how we were able, because HIV/AIDS is a big issue for me, as you can imagine. My first day on the floor, I spoke about AIDS 35 years ago. But anyway, the community coming out to support HIV and AIDS over time really did help us, in my view, who've been working on this for a long time, helped us with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, with marriage equality, with other things, because of that outside mobilization. And the beautiful thing about it is, and this is some of the things we talked about this morning, is that it wasn't about when we were doing the hate crimes bill in the Congress. This is a while back when I was Speaker the first time. We couldn't get it passed because it had trans in it. And people would, and they said, you can't even imagine the amendments the other side were putting up to put people on the spot and all that. Maybe you could imagine, but in any event, they came to me as Speaker and said, well, it looks like you could pass it in a minute if you take out trans. I said, you go tell them back, because it's like the business community didn't want bathrooms. You know, it was all, you don't remember that, but that was kind of a thing about bathrooms at the time. Bathrooms. Have unisex bathrooms. Who cares about bathrooms? We're talking about people's lives. So anyway, I said to them, you go tell them that no, we're not going to pass it in a minute if we take out trans. We're never going to pass it in 100 years if we don't keep in trans, because that's our most vulnerable at the time. And so we did pass it with trans. Barney Frank was wonderful. The Matthew Shepard's family came. Even they brought the sheriff from the county, Laramie County, to lobby around the country because he learned from knowing people. And I think that what we were hearing this morning is the more people, know what's happening in their families, in their communities, and the rest. Anyway, in most places, I'm not saying every place in America, but hopefully that will spread. But I think it's a decision that we have to make to be fiercely against, forgive me for being so, but fiercely against these bills, just to show how they are contrary to any of the stuff that these people are saying about we're all God's children, all that, except what? We're against discrimination, except get out of here. So that's figure of speech. You know? So in any case, thank you for your question. And what I say to you is any efforts that we make in this regard makes America more American. It's about freedom. So thank you for your concern in that regard. And it's something it should be clear, but it always isn't to people. And so we still have a lot of work to do. But let's do it together. Let's do that together.
Well, I'm very sad to say that we seem to be out of time.
I thought that would be an applause line, by the way.
Before we say goodbye, I just wanted to just alert everybody in the audience to please stay in your seats as we say goodbye to the speaker. So let her and her team depart safely from the building. But thank you so much. We know you have a lot of choices of where to go, and we really appreciate you spent some of your time with us here at the University of Chicago in the Institute of Politics.
Let's hear it for our moderator. Thank you so much. Thank you all.